morning, everyone, and thank you for joining the Sustainable Safe Selling U.S. Food to the European Consumer. I'm Chloe Mesh, the Director of Programs at WUSADA, the Western United States Agricultural Trade Association. I wanted to go over a few housekeeping notes. Today's webinar will be recorded, and we'll make sure to email you the recording link from our YouTube page within the next few days. You'll remain muted during this presentation, but please submit questions anytime throughout the Q&A feature. We'll address your questions during the dedicated Q&A session at the end, and we'll follow up with by email on anything that we don't cover live. If you would like to say your question out loud, there will be an opportunity for you to use the Request a Live Call-in button, where you can raise your hand and enter the queue to ask your question live. Well, today I am pleased to introduce Thomas McFadden from Bryant Christie, who will be presenting on today's webinar. So if you're a Western U.S. food exporter eyeing Europeans' $200 billion import market, you know the opportunity is massive, but so are the challenges. So European consumers demand traceability, sustainability, and certifications that go far beyond U.S. standards. So today we'll cut through the complexity. You'll learn which EU requirements are mandatory versus optional, and how to position sustainability as your competitive edge, and what European buyers really want. So we'll also share a case study from a US exporter just to crack into this market. So now we'll dive in, and I'll pass it over to you, Thomas. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Chloe. Appreciate the introduction there, and glad to have everyone joining us today. A bit about myself. I've been working with Bryant Christie for 5 years now in the market development unit, and we work on some of the same grants that USADA does, USDA export development grants that, the same kind of run in the same circles and use the same grants that they do to support your businesses. So we're pleased to be talking about this important topic, and I'm looking forward a little later on to introducing Suzanne Devereaux, the Director of International Marketing at American Pistachio Growers, and having her share some of her insights and keys to success as we learn how to navigate some of the intricacies of selling U.S. food to the European consumer. Bit of a preview what we're going to discuss here. We've got a few kind of core objectives. We're going to begin with discussing understanding the European consumer, some of the sentiments and considerations that can help you find your foothold in the market. We will turn then to the regulatory landscape and what market entry looks like, and kind of the key regulations that you need to understand to enable market entry. Bouncing off of that, we're going to look at how to gain and maintain a competitive advantage in the European market, and then run through some of the practical steps that you'll need to keep in mind for ensuring you have a successful venture into the European market. So a bit about understanding the European consumer. Many of the sentiments and the outlooks that guide purchasing decisions in the U.S. are similar in Europe. There are some key differences and nuances to be aware of. So we're going to transition to sort of talking through some of those differences and how you can examine your product and make sure it's successful. A key consideration is health versus sustainability, and how sort of those two facets interact with the regulatory and consumer landscapes in Europe. One of the key differences is that regulatory considerations is between regulatory considerations and emotional connections. Often, there's certainly overlap between health and sustainability within that landscape, but often health is more of a regulatory concern, and sustainability is positioned as kind of an emotional connection for your consumer. Generally speaking, European consumers are interested in products with additional health benefits, products that are high in protein, high in fiber, or have benefits to sleep health or diabetes management, or sort of whatever the case may be, are sought after. Kind of a basic rationale to understand behind that is that for many European consumers, and we're generalizing here and we'll sort of generalize throughout, but many European consumers have their caloric needs met already. And they have the disposable income to be discerning. And so when they are able to purchase products with additional health benefits, they do. So seeking out or kind of highlighting the additional benefit to your product can give you a leg up. Similarly, that disposable income allows them to prioritize products that they trust have been produced sustainably, and this can come in the form of regulatory requirements, certainly as we'll touch on later, but it also is indicative of the consumer outlook for many in Europe. They're looking to purchase products that they know have been produced in a sustainable fashion. Within that ethos, certainly consumers and governments alike in Europe want packaging and labels to be easily understood. In general, European consumers are looking for transparency and an easy understanding of what goes into the product that they're purchasing. They're looking for natural ingredients. So they often will steer towards products that are free from additives or low on man-made dyes, or just kind of they're looking for a product that is in its kind of most natural state. Also within that ethos is looking for products that have been produced ethically. There's certainly a preference for responsible sourcing, that the consumers can understand that the people involved, from producers all the way through the value chain to getting that product on the shelf, that the people involved in that process have been treated equitably. So the disposable income for many in Europe allows these things to be priorities, and understanding that will give you a leg up as you look to enter this key market. So drilling down a little further and touching a bit more on sort of the consumer sentiment side of this landscape, there's certain trends that are worth keeping in mind, and there's some similarities here, but bouncing off the idea of products with additional health benefits, there's a preference recently for products that are plant-based proteins or dairy alternatives. And if this is not reflective of your product, the kind of key sentiment there is that relying on some sort of value-added concept as you promote your product is helpful in catching the eye of a European consumer. Clean labeling, which we've touched on, is important, both in terms of what is actually on the ingredients list, but what's on the packaging. People in Europe want to be able to pick up a product and easily understand what it is and what's in it. So that means ideally a push towards natural colors and flavorings, minimal processing, and the like. And then within that as well, looking for functional foods, sort of similar to the added health benefit claim here as well. There's palpable interest among European consumers to find products that benefit some sort of health aspect or offer some sort of additional benefit rather. While it is important to craft a narrative that promotes additional benefit, you need to make sure that any health or sustainability claims do not run afoul of regulations, EU regulations, and these regulations may be different than what you're used to in the U.S. The role of certifications comes into play here and can be a key consideration as you look to understand the regulatory landscape and how it may be different from what you're familiar with in selling your products in the U.S. EU organic is certainly a big one and ensures compliance with EU organic farming standards. It's sort of a mesh between sustainability and dependability. There's a variety of certifications that might come into play, and you'll need to sort of see where your product fits into that landscape. But to highlight a few others, the Marine Stewardship Council governs or certifies rather sustainably caught wild seafood. Its counterpart in the Aquaculture Stewardship Council sustainably or certifies farm raised seafood. And so there's kind of a variety of different specific certifications that may cross the threshold for EU regulations. Fair trade is another key one, which should be fairly familiar, at least as a concept, but this governs fair labor practices, equitable pricing, and sort of ensuring that the value chain or the production process that arrives your product on shelves has been done so in an equitable and dependable manner. Another one to toss in that comes to mind for me is halal certifications. Certainly rising in the U.S. and I'm sure rising in Europe as well. In many communities, there's growing demand for halal certified food, and so it all sort of speaks to a landscape that where people place trust in certifications, and it behooves the exporter to be aware of where your product fits into that landscape. I'd say this is a sort of a big and diverse world, but you don't have to go it alone. A key takeaway for me is that you can work with an importer or various partners within the market or to guide you through this process and what certifications are beneficial and how to achieve them. Retailers similar to importers are a good resource there, as is WUSADA, who can help connect you to dependable import partners and help you sort of steer you towards a dependable partner in the market that can help guide you through what it takes to get some of these certifications or what it takes to ensure you are in compliance with EU regulations. So a bit more about the regulatory landscape. Hoping to talk through just sort of some of the basics of the European approach to food safety and how those may differ from what you are used to with selling your products here in the U.S. Sort of the distilled down version is the emphasis in the EU is around precaution, consumer protection, and transparency. And while these are certainly important factors into the U.S.-based approach, the U.S. approach is more about establishing safety limits, and then within that framework, much of the responsibility for safety is left to the industry to govern or to the consumer to be discerning. I'm going to sort of shamelessly steal an analogy from a senior colleague here and describe the differences in how either group would approach encountering a tiger. The EU approach to encountering a tiger would be to say that tigers are dangerous and therefore should be banned. The US approach would be to say that, yes, tigers are dangerous, but if we put this tiger in a cage, it has been made safe. The point being that with maximum residue levels or additives or pesticides, if we can establish what is a safe level, a safe threshold for human consumption, below that, there is no risk to human consumption. So it's a bit more of a risk-based model than a precautionary model, but understanding that framework, I think, lends some visibility into how the approach differs and the sort of regulatory needs that follow. So some key differences in the food safety landscape. the EU sets strict maximum residue level or MRL levels limits for pesticides and many additives. So many of those additives that are improved in the US are not allowed in the EU. And similarly, label requirements are strict as well, and must align with a list of EU definitions. And these kind of differences may not be what you encounter in selling your products in the US. You don't need to be an expert in each of them, but it is practical to utilize the resources, be it an importer or research or kind of whatever the case may be, in coming to an understanding of how your product fits into those landscapes or those regulations. Documentation is a key part of this process. It's one thing to say that your product is sustainable or free of certain additives or within MRL limits, but it's certainly another to document and prove that. And the importers or retailers, whoever is bringing your product into the European market, is really the arbiter of compliance there. They are responsible for making sure that the products they're selling there, your product, has met those regulations. And so you can lean on them as a guide, and kind of utilize their expertise in navigating what is ultimately a complex and burdensome system. Thinking a little bit more about sustainability regulations and sort of highlighting a similar EU versus US dynamic. I'd also note that I'm using EU generally. I would incorporate the UK into this too. Obviously, following Brexit, they are not in the EU, but many of the regulations that they were found by and when they were in the European Union have continued to the UK. So just a bit of a disclaimer there. But in the EU, sustainability is regulated or is governed by regulations. In the US, because we kind of approach sustainability with a disparate and sometimes conflicting group of certifications, which are not governed by a single cohesive federal policy, the approach in the US is driven a bit more by marketability and what consumers grow to trust. That's sort of a key difference there. The concerns and the understanding of sustainability can be the same between the two, but the practical implications are governed through regulation in the EU, whereas the US is more through certification and consumer buy-in to those certifications. I would say, though, however, that US exporters often meet EU regulations already. If you have some certifications for your product or kind of whatever the relevant case may be, oftentimes you're further along than you might have thought. And this really aids in creating, or at least beginning to create, a dependable consumer narrative that will resonate with consumers in the European Union. So distilling it down, some key takeaways here. Compliance is non-negotiable and documentation must be airtight. But within this framework, there is certainly opportunity. I sort of liken the market entry experience to a buy once, cry once dynamic, where while burdensome up front, once you've sort of done your homework and jumped through the hoops, you're in. And to put it all in perspective, the benefit of going through that process is gaining access to a very high income market with, I don't know, over 700 million consumers, high disposable incomes, and the ability to really drive some serious sales. So that's the benefit. That's the goal of kind of enduring all of this regulation and administrative responsibility. So it's worth examining what building a competitive advantage looks like for you. Once you kind of get all your homework done, you can turn to the sort of promotional narrative that will make your brand and your product successful. One key concept to consider based on consumer sentiment in Europe is leveraging sustainability. It's worth examining, taking a critical eye into your product. What key attributes can you highlight? Is there a sustainability focused narrative kind of embedded already? What farm practices are employed in your industry? What is the carbon footprint? How is water used? Some of these key pillars of creating your product may already make for a compelling story. I think of it, some of my experience or just the mix of accounts I work with. Brewers will often send spent grain to dairy farms. Integrated pest management in orchards. I know that's something that's part of the approach with pistachio growers or other, variety of other products like adding solar power. There's often a narrative already in progress that you can depend on to set your product apart. I think it's worth noting, however, that almost always, first and foremost, you are selling this narrative to an importer rather than the end consumer. You need to find a partner in the market that believes in your story and thinks that it is commercially viable. And so that's kind of the primary concern, is crossing many of those hurdles already to make sure that an importer doesn't have to figure it out for you. And one of the ways, we've touched on this a little, but one of the ways that you can work on doing that is using third-party certifications to build trust. When you're entering a new market, you'll almost certainly be faced with existing competition. Industry-specific certifications not only satisfy imports or EU regulations, but they help build trust for consumers. You're likely not going to be able to rely on the brand recognition that you have now in the U.S. as you enter a new market, and creating an easily identifiable piece of trust that a consumer can pick up your package and immediately understand is trustworthy, really puts you ahead of the curve and helps to give you a leg up as you build trust in a new market. So to kind of run through some of the practical steps for export readiness here, I touched on this briefly, but typically prior to or in addition to creating a narrative for consumers, you need to outline that narrative to your importer. They need to be convinced, the importer or the retailer, whoever's going to be receiving and selling your product in Europe, needs to be convinced that they can sell it, that it is commercially viable, that it has, strong sales potential. And part of that process is crossing some of these hurdles from the get-go. Labeling is a key consideration here. We touched on it already, but really the drive to ensure that requirements are met either on packaging or with a sticker after the fact once it's imported, or kind of whatever the case may be, ensuring that your labeling meets EU requirements is key. Similarly, ingredients need to comply with EU definitions and safety regulations. Health claims need to be demonstrable and verifiable. Sustainability claims operate in the same way. Claims of added benefit, while a valuable marketing narrative, need to be verifiable and align with EU expectations and definitions. So documentation is kind of the last piece of that puzzle. Being able to document and depend on all of these things as you navigate the regulatory landscape is key. It's one thing one thing to say that you meet these regulations, and it's another to prove it. So building that initial habit of strong documentation is really going to benefit you in the long run. As you think about these things and prepare yourself in dealing with EU regulations and documenting your product, it's really worth thinking about these terms or these steps in the process. It's worth thinking about how they can benefit you, and how they can benefit your goal of creating a marketing narrative that will position your brand well in the market. So I'd encourage you not to let these items be a barrier. They are certainly burdensome, but to think critically about your process and find a way to overcome them, because they can be a benefit in positioning your product, and certainly a benefit to gaining access to an important market. A key part of this dynamic is to work with a partner that has a proven and dependable track record. And specifically, working with an importer that will ensure that your product arrives on shelves in its most optimal form. That means, verifying their cold chain is what they say it is, if that's a relevant part of the process for your product, that their distribution models are dependable, that their logistics process is similarly dependable. So really highlights that selecting the right partner is key, because if they aren't, a knowledgeable advocate for you who's a dependable partner in the market, you not only risk poor sales in the short term, but you risk long-term credibility for your brand. Putting it in perspective a little for a product close to my heart, if you export a beer to, exporting a beer to Thailand, if it gets all the way there and has been kept cold the whole way, it's going to taste good. But if you open a beer up and sat in a 95-degree ambient Thai warehouse for 6 months, it will taste bad. It's just not going to be good. And then what are you providing to that end consumer, and are they going to keep buying it? So really cannot stress enough the importance of finding a dependable partner and ensuring, making all of this legwork worth it, to ensure that your product reaches shelves in the best form that it possibly can. But I'd like to turn now to Suzanne for some insights and personal experiences with her, as part of her position as the Director of International Marketing for Asia and Europe for American pistachio growers. I've worked with Suzanne for a couple of years now, and I'm excited to hear her insights on how they sort of navigate this landscape and position American pistachios, already a premium product, in a premium market. So without further ado, I can turn it over to Suzanne.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thomas is a very important part of what we do at American Pistachio Growers. He is a tremendous partner, and quite frankly, I'm not sure if we would know what to do without him. So I'll go ahead and let me go ahead and just talk through some of the key points. All right. So at American Pistachio Growers, Europe is a very, very important market for us. And so essentially, it all starts for me with trade marketing. So the EU makes it much easier to do business across borders, with shared rules and common food safety standards. And in many countries, a single currency. Trade is more predictable and efficient, which makes my job a little bit easier. Even though a few countries are not part of the EU, the overall structure still simplifies how goods are moved across Europe. So for APG, this means that we can manage trade, build campaigns, and stay compliant much more easily, while we tailor our approach to the unique needs of each one of our countries. And so because the EU makes cross-border trade easier, pistachio supply chains reach across many different countries. But Germany is especially important to us. It receives nearly 100 million pounds of U.S. pistachios every year, and it serves as a key entry point to Europe for us. A major reason is that two of Europe's biggest retailers, which is Aldi and Lidl, are based in Germany. Lidl has more than 12,000 stores across 32 countries, and Aldi operates over 10,000 stores across the region. Both rely heavily on private label, and this basically means that they move a much larger volume of American pistachios under many different brand names. So partnerships with these types of retailers are critical for us. So when we gain placement in Germany, it doesn't just impact one market. It actually helps American pistachios essentially be put on shelves all across Europe. So this increases visibility and long-term demand, which is great. Next up, I'll be talking about consumer marketing. I always like to say that we don't just market pistachios, we prove why they matter. And so our marketing strategy always begins with science. So we start by identifying the health interests of what matters most to our consumers in each of our key markets around the world. And from there, we invest in scientific studies that explore whether eating pistachios can positively influence those specific health areas. The result of this research becomes the foundation for all of our global marketing efforts, and it really shapes our messaging, our creative campaigns, and partnerships with healthcare professionals, nutritionists all around the world. So strong science helps us to speak with credibility, meet consumers where their interests are, and ultimately to help drive long-term demand of American pistachios. So right now we have about 12 APG funded studies underway, and these include topics like brain health, exercise recovery, sleep, weight management, and other emerging areas of consumer interest. So our incredible design team came up with these awesome nutrition icons. And so our nutrition research is really, I would say, it completes the scientific findings that are validated. Our next step is to publish and communicate these results in a way that are both effective and accessible to our consumer. So scientific papers are written for researchers, not everyday consumers. So we have to translate these key findings into simple language that people can easily understand and apply to their lives. So here are a few examples of positive APG funded studies. These results were taken from scientific literature and converted into consumer-friendly messages. These help us communicate the benefits of pistachios in a way that resonates, hopefully inspires action, and ultimately drives strong demand. All right, so this is actually a new approach for us. Over this last year, what we did is we actually determined that we needed to understand better who our target consumer was. So even though many of the countries we're marketing in are part of the EU, we still localize our strategy and our marketing efforts. Culture, language, consumer habits, and food traditions, they all vary dramatically from one country to the other. So one size fits all approach just simply doesn't work in Europe. Great marketers allow their consumers to lead their marketing brand, and we take the same approach at APG. So by listening closely to what motivates consumers in each market, we like to tailor our messaging, our creative, and our nutrition communication in ways that feel authentic and relevant. So this consumer-led strategy allows APGs to essentially ensure that our messages are resonating in every country that we serve. So because we had this amazing consumer segmentation, Europe is incredibly unique. And so we realized that our strategy needed to reflect all of those differences. So what we did is we identified, so currently we market in 5 different countries in Europe. So Spain, the UK, France, Germany, and Italy. And so this approach gave us a sharper focus and clearer priorities and a much more targeted way to build demand for American pistachio growers. And there's several different examples that I'd love to provide, but for the sake of time, I wanted to talk about our consumer in Spain. So our target audience is a modern health-minded woman between the ages of 24 and 54. And she has to balance work, her family, and personal well-being. And she wants a snack that is convenient, nutritious, and aligns with her goals regarding energy and fitness and just overall feeling good. So our agency that we partnered with in Spain created a campaign called Snack Like a Woman. Now, this campaign speaks directly to her mindset. This empowers her to choose a smart, protein-rich snack that is backed by credible nutrition science. And so our goal is simply to position American pistachios as a balanced, better for you option that fits seamlessly into her everyday life. All right, another really important tactic that we have seen works very well across Europe is to partner with other brands, especially American brands. It really gives a great power punch. An example of our collaboration is with Edeka. Now, this is a German brand. And what we did is we had a special Super Bowl themed promotion featuring American pistachios alongside Corona. And the results were far better than we anticipated. So the reach was just over 144 million views. And we do a lot with our agencies to determine effectiveness and efficiency. And so when you take a look at numbers like 0.0008 cents per view, this is actually far better than our typical industry benchmarks. And more importantly, and what is most important to our growers and our processors, is that sales increased by 114% during this promotion. So this campaign demonstrated that pairing American pistachios with other well-known U.S. products, especially during culturally relevant moments like the Super Bowl, really delivers strong, high engagement and significant lifts in sales. And so at the end of the day, that's what we're looking for. How do we, number one, market to our consumer? We want awareness, but we also want them to be buying our pistachios. So the sales increase of 114% was pretty significant. We're pretty proud of this promotion. So in closing, here's what's working for us in Europe. So we want to identify our core audience, understand who they are, speak their language. They all have a pain point. And so you want to find out, how does your product meet their needs specifically? And then overall nutrition messaging, I would say all consumers have a need to improve and sustain their health. So if there's a way to tie in your health nutrition of your products, it resonates much stronger with your consumer. And then find partnerships. Partnerships are so important, whether that's a brand or a private label, again, like we see in Germany. It's just really important to be able to build those partners, even with our trade partners, all around our agencies is really important to what we're doing and all the success we're having. So that's all I have, Thomas.
Awesome. Thanks, Suzanne. That was informative. Great to see sort of the real life implementation of some of these strategies. I think we've got one question here in the chat, and maybe we can open it up further after that. But Bob has asked here how long U.S. pistachios have been in the EU. I wasn't quite sure. Do you know? I think it's been a long time. But.
It has been a long time. I know that actually our trade partner that we've been working with, he's actually been working with American pistachio growers for more than 30. I believe he told me he was having his 38th anniversary. So wow. We've been in the market for quite a long time. So we've weathered lots of storms, but we have a really good pulse on what's happening.
Awesome. Great tenure there. I don't know if we have any other questions or Chloe, if what the next move is, but happy to answer questions if anyone has any.
Yeah, we can do the Q&A session right now. So yeah, if anybody has any questions, please let us know. Right, we do have a few questions that are popping up. So how are condiments doing in Europe?
Suzanne, any thoughts on condiments?
I would say there's a lot of innovation taking place in Europe, which is great for us. I mean, obviously pistachios are what I'm is the most important to us, of course, but innovation in terms of how they're applying various, I know with pistachios, there's pistachio butters, pistachio creams, and that segment is actually growing significantly. I can get more information. I can try to find more information from our trade partner who has access to that. So, but I would assume that it's a pretty important category in Europe.
Thank you. All right. Another question we have: as a new business looking to expand in Europe, are there other resources that are good?
I'm maybe similarly not quite sure on that. I know WSADA has good resources, and the partners that we work with, representing a wide variety of commodities, are certainly good resources themselves. There's plenty of experience working on bringing in different commodities and marketing those commodities within Europe. So reaching out to some of your kind of local trade type agencies like WSADA can help point you in the direction of some of those import partners who are really experienced in navigating this process, and then how to succeed once you are in. So that'd be kind of my, on a pretty general sense, that would be my recommendation. Yeah, I don't know, Suzanne, if you have other thoughts on that.
Actually, I would say that, again, aside from having strong partners like Thomas, who provide a tremendous amount of knowledge in very specific areas, there's nothing better than boots on the ground, in my opinion. So finding a strong, whether it's trade or trade and marketing agency, will give you, in my opinion, it's given us a leg up. I think that part of the reason why we've been so successful in Europe is because we found an incredible trade partner who they're really the ones who are establishing the relationships. And also for myself, so we use Midsummer Marketing as our trade. And anytime we have questions or concerns regarding whether it's rules, regulations, Thomas is always my first go-to, and then I'm always connecting with my trade partner to make sure that the information is aligned. And if Thomas doesn't have the answer, inevitably, if they don't know it, they find it. And so it's just really great to have boots on the ground partnerships, if you can at all implement that strategy.
All right. Next question. Do we know what the status of the new trade agreements with the EU?
I've not heard any concrete movement beyond basic agreements to have an agreement. I don't think we've nothing's been signed, and the proposed deals in response to tariff reductions or that kind of thing are, as far as I understand, still proposed and not signed into law. Not going to position myself as an expert on the intricacies of each of those, but I think it's still sort of in progress. There's been some agreement on frameworks, but nothing's been signed, as far as I understand.
Right. Next question we have is: which country or counties are more focused on healthy food products like flaxseed product and 100% whole grain ancient grains?
I'm not sure about those specific products in a specific country, but I think that the priority would probably be more of finding parts of the market in any of the countries that you're looking to market in Europe. I'd probably be starting with some of the more high income markets, a Germany or a UK that sort of has a little bit easier or more developed trade industry behind the food sector. But within that, I'd envision looking more at segments of the market that look at or where that resonates, rather than a country or sort of a geographical framework.
Thank you.
If I can just interject really quick, part of the reason why it's so important to do consumer segmentation in Europe or even if let's say you're deciding between Germany and UK or France or Spain, they all have very different nutritional needs and requirements. And for instance, in France, there is a tremendous misconception around healthy fats. And so most people, when we did consumer segmentation and did questionnaires, there was a misconception about pistachios, and in their terms, they thought that pistachios contained unhealthy fats. So there's a part of having to educate consumers. So depending on what segment you're looking at marketing to, that really does play a significant role in where I would choose my emerging markets. I hope that is a little more helpful as well.
Yes, thank you. All right, do we have any more questions? Nope. Well, we do have a question. Which region likes spicy foods more? That's a good question.
I don't know. Suzanne, I think they're pretty cosmopolitan, and a lot of the big cities in each of these countries, certainly in the last 10 years, has seen an inflow of different communities and cultures popping up. The UK, I think, would not traditionally be looked at a spicy food sort of place, but there's so many different people in all of these countries that there's I think a market for spicy foods almost anywhere. Any big city is gonna have people who like spicy foods.
Mm-hmm. We do have a question. Are you available after the webinar if we have more questions? Yes. So you can schedule a complimentary 30-minute consultation with Brian Christie, and I'll make sure to include that link with the follow-up email. Perfect. Well, following today's webinar, you will receive a brief survey, and your feedback is super crucial. It helps us improve and secure continued funding for these types of programs. So we'd greatly appreciate if you could take a moment to complete it. And just like I mentioned a few moments ago, you can schedule a complimentary 30-minute consult with Brian Christie, and I'll make sure to include that link. And we'll also include the recording for this webinar as well, so you can go back if you had any questions or you wanted to go through the presentation again. But we just wanted to say thank you so much for joining, and thank you to both of our speakers today. And like I said, we'll follow up via email. But I hope everyone has a great day, and we look forward to supporting your export journey. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.